But first I wanted to touch on what I was talking to you last week about the formation of a mining district and combating the federal imposition locally. And, I've been talking about that for ever since I've come onto this network and was talking about it before. That's right. And help find out, well, really it was just a question. And there's something that looked wrong about the permits that miners were required to get. And then was asked to come in and look at it, being that I've had a couple decades of research into mining, into law generally, and where the heck did it go? And lots of you are here because lots of you were inspired by the Ron Paul movement, which I thought was kind of funny, although, it brought a lot of people to the attention that there was something really, really wrong. But this mining law focused me on something that you could hear tell of what might be available to us when you talk about soil and the possession of it. And this mining law pretty well straightened up that fact. And you hear me talk about it periodically. I don't get too deep into it, but I do have a listenership that listens for it. And it is very important, and it drives my discussion a lot of times about property and property law. And you have to have a sense about that, or you probably don't have much, because if you don't know about property, you probably are property. And as we were talking last week with Chris Gio's incident, you start finding out you don't have the rights you think you have in the first instance, and that poses the very first problem. So in addressing some of these problems and trying to get back control of our lives, and through the mining law and through the miners' law, which was acknowledged in Congress in 1866 by the law of 1866, July 26th is when the date would happen, where mining districts were acknowledged to be formed, and that the rules of the miners should rule where they were not contrary to the laws of the United States. We've been pressed as miners in the last few decades by this new agenda from the United Nations, essentially, when you see where it comes from. And if not, just a lack of awareness of property and disrespect in people, the lack of principle to recognize property in people, and that they need property. You find out in history, folks, if you don't have a place to stay, if you're a vagabond, and whether or not by choice or not, or you're a gypsy, if you will, if you're not able to settle down, you're not able to settle. And this law was enacted to settle the land. In other words, get people out and working on the land. Now that right there tells you where the power is and where the wealth is. The wealth is in a people that can settle down and create livelihood. Now the mining districts were formed essentially to protect miners protecting themselves. Remember, early on, before even the mining law, miners were outlaws, and they still needed peace amongst themselves because you're dealing with valuable property. And we've heard a lot of the tales about the dastardly deeds that went on against miners. So the miners would get together, a number of them, and they would form an agreement amongst themselves on what constituted the formation of a claim, how you'd keep it, essentially what it would take to hold it, and what it would take to establish it. And all the rules around it, and eventually it built up that these were governments that actually instituted trials and had sheriffs and outlawed lawyers right off the bat. The lawyers never got along with the miners because it was miners' law, not lawyers' legal, and so they would run the lawyers right out. So there's already oil and water here to begin with, and that's fascinating. We find today that lawyers, if you will, lawyers in robes, attorneys in robes, are the ones that are actually determining miners' law right now, and that's not setting too well with the miners. So there's a lot of things that are going on with the agencies of the federal government moving against mining law, actually moving against the grantor's grant, and just imposing upon miners terribly, to the point where the land is no longer settled. And the miners are always under attack, and under this agency rule, as we talked about last week, and you've heard periodically hosts on this network talk about the Administrative Procedures Act. Well, these agencies didn't exist at the time of the mining law, or the miners' law. Miners' law is possessive to the miner too. Understand this. And they originally formed up themselves into an organization called a district in order to protect themselves against marauders, against people that would come and plunder their property. and attack them and steal their stuff. And that's what we have essentially today in the federal government, with the agencies coming against miners who have property and property rights, and they're coming and taking and plundering their stuff and stealing their lands and stealing their claims. And so we're not much different than just before 1866, when the miners had to form up. But luckily today, the 1866 law gives people, miners, the right to form a mining district by which they can protect themselves. And I've told you that we put a call out for all the people in Northern California and Southern Oregon and forever out. I mean, whatever it took to get people into a meeting and a series of meetings to discuss the formation of a mining district. We have people as far away as Indiana showing up into the West Coast to talk about this and to work toward forming a mining district. And because the need is so great, we had people coming from all over the country, literally, to attend this. Good friends out of Washington, I've only met once after 5 years and 6 years, again, seeing him once again, coming down to this is that important. If I can bring it to this point, this was an historic meeting that we had Friday, because it was a bunch of miners coming together to reassert their power as individual people to create a government to protect itself. And we had a very good turnout. I believe it was sufficient. It was certainly given plenty of notice. It was sufficient. It reminded me why I don't like to get into formations of organizations, but nonetheless, it's what we have to do to protect us. We have to rally up. In my mind, it's pretty clear what we had to do, but we have to get roughly 70 people to agree on a number of things. And this is what they did in the old days. They came together and had to agree on how they would continue to agree to protect themselves. So in 70 miners attending, we had to go through a diligent inquiry into the specifics of the formation of a mining district and the validity of it, the lawfulness of it, how to make it lawful, and how to lawfully do it. And through that time, we came up with a discussion of what the name, the size, what would be involved, what our purpose would be, and we actually got to the point where we voted in a recorder. And we'll talk a little bit more back after the break about some of the specifics here, and you'll hear what we'll be able to do in just a moment. And thank you for tuning in today, Behind the Woodshed. I hope you're having a great day. I hope all of you all on the East Coast and Northern are doing okay. It's a pretty interesting problem. You start realizing what preparation's all about. You know, we hear about the term being a prepper. You don't know what nature can throw at you, and these things kind of remind us is how small we might actually be in the scheme of things. And how much we really have to, we can only protect ourselves so much. So we have to remember to have contingency plans and start to think about the unthinkable. But in working through our issues and trying to be prepared and trying to set up at least our little sanctuary of freedom, at least where it looked like the law supported it all, and then it got overthrown by federalism, the miners have had to come together by they've been oppressed so long that they've been forced out of their minds. Now they got nothing to do. That's part of the joke. You should have left the miners alone. They wouldn't have had to do this. And now you wouldn't be looking at the problem and the power that the miners have when they finally come to step and take back their land. And it's going to be eventually a far-reaching effect if the miners will eventually pull together and to pull this off. But they've done the first step. And the first step was to go through and get everybody's idea about and information about the mining district. And after about a couple hours of discussion and working through some of the problems and trying to get an idea of what it was, there's some requirements. I won't go through all the details. I'm just going to give you now the summary of what we did. After meeting the requirements, we declared and named the mining district, and the mining district is named Jefferson Mining District. That will be an area, which we also had to determine. And that area will comprise the area approximating what was known as the state of Jefferson. For those of you that want to just check that out, it is still yet to be documented and recorded, the exactness. We will have to put an exacting geographical boundary down. But the state of Jefferson was never really definitively declared. And so we were to give people of the Southern Oregon and Northern California, the miners, the idea of what would be covered by this mining district, which is fairly large for what it has to do. We have made the borders, and you can go find them on the internet by just looking at State of Jefferson. We will be doing and utilizing the approximation of those borders to become the Jefferson Mining District borders. This will take up a major and large geographic mineral deposition, which would be required for such a district. The purpose was declared at the initiation of the purpose was declared to be that of working with the coordination plan, which deals on a federal level. So we could essentially, as our discussion went through, we decided we could handle a bigger district than normally was historic, because today's miners have a whole other matter to deal with than the miners of old. They never had to deal with federal agencies coming against the grantor's will and attacking the grantee. And so there's this thing called coordination that really is going to help out right now. It's a big tool that a mining district can wield, that although the little miner could, the independent miner may not have had the ability and power to do so because he's all by himself. So this area, which is very large if you think about it, it's almost the size of a small state, is going to be actually managed pretty well, in that we will be developing mining camps, if you will, that will approximate the borders of the existing counties within the mining district. So we're going to be, and the miners within those mining camps will be able to deal with their issues locally, utilizing the umbrella coordination plan that will be developed by the mining district. Now, that mining district was formed by a it was unanimous vote. It was just a few dissenters for particular reasons, not necessarily about the formation of the district, but things like the name and things. So there weren't that many that were dissented. Those people, they were notated. This was not supposed to be a rout of any kind, and we have a very important job to do about the structuring of this organization, so that it doesn't become the failure that you see, where 50.1% of the people vote for something and the rest have to bite it. That's not the way this is going to work. But we had to vote a recorder, which I thought was the very first thing we needed to do, and we did. And Ida is going to be the first Jefferson Mining District recorder of record. We decided to, because we didn't actually have the structure declared yet, we decided to vote an interim chairman who will guide us through the meetings that will develop into how the structure, the physical structure of this thing will be. And Kirby has been named the interim chairman. Now you have to understand, we had an association meeting, which on the Southwestern Oregon Mining Association was essentially at that point the host of this meeting to form a mining district. And so we essentially had two entities at that moment, short of the recording, which the fact of the recording will be made here soon when the documentation gets made up and we have finalized the determination of the boundaries, which was voted on to be the approximation of the state of Jefferson. So those will be put into writing, and that will be filed in the seat of the Jefferson Mining District, which will be in the records of the Josephine County in Oregon. So for those of you listening, you can be able to eventually check this out. This will be as law says, and will be recorded for all the world to see and public notice. So at that point, we have our recorder, we have an interim chairman, we have ourselves a mining district, but for the perfection, which would be the recording at the county, which will be really soon here in the next couple weeks. And so at that point, we had motions and such, trying to work as best we could through the Roberts Rules of Order, and we're going to probably have to learn those a lot better, as we found out there's lots of discussion that has to go on that we need to keep track of. But we tabled the rules for the formation of rules pending an organizational structure, which I suggested to you, and it was suggested and discussed that the organizational structure will be very, very important here, a lot more than it may have been before with the miners of old. The initial purpose of the district, as I said, will be to author and implement a coordination plan, which is under federal law required if you want to have your rights and concerns and property recognized by the federal government. And then once that plan is put into effect, the federal government the agency shall take notice of this and cannot override it, because you're now equals before the federal government. And that's what we were doing this for, is to have a seat at the table. And this will be independent and equal to the county itself or even the state governments. So this is very powerful and very important. Now, initially, we're going to be doing the coordination plan, and I suggest here, though we didn't discuss too much of it, as we get our feet under us as a mining district and start to get the miners implementing the plan that will be written, and we see how this works, we will be probably turning our attention to the state and the local oppression that local agencies are doing in the same regard to attempt to disregard the mining law and the property rights and the rights of people. And you have to understand the scope of this mining law is pretty impressive in that it speaks to the highways, it speaks to the travel, the ingress and egress, it speaks to the ownership of the soil, the creation of wealth, the water, and the control of this all in those that would take up and accept that grant. So stay tuned. I've got a couple more things to say about that. We'll talk about this coordination plan just a little bit more, and then I'll move on to some things that are more technical to Chris Gio's situation with the issue of false imprisonment and how simply and quickly that happens to us, and how we may have an opportunity to defend ourselves there. Stay tuned. I want to get over back to the mining district here. The mining district is going to be initiating a coordination plan. The miners in the local mining camps, which we, as I said, will be approximating the borders of the existing counties, wherever they are in Northern California or Southern Oregon, those miners will be able to take this coordination plan into their local federal federal district meeting where plans will be made, and they will be able to assert what that plan says the federal agencies have to acknowledge. Now, what's in the news today, I'll just read it to you, and this is interesting. This tells me that we're going to have a place, the miners will have a big voice here, because people who are dealing in coordination may not understand the absolute power. And I got that victimhood condition here in this title. Off-road discussion urged Redding, Shasta County, hope to renew talks with the Forest Service. Hope to renew talks is not coordination, folks. That's cooperation, and that's not a coordinating mindset. Shasta County and Redding leaders hope to draw United States Forest Service officials back into a discussion about who may use roads on public lands. Folks, this is completely the wrong attitude. When you have coordination, the United States government, by whatever agency, is forced to the table. There's no hope of drawing them back. They will have to come back when you assert it. And so this is the thing in the power that the miners are very keen to, that I think, and we have been told, that at least the BLM is very concerned about what we will be doing now that we're organized up. And I'm telling you this, folks, because we're looking for things to do. We're looking to re-empower ourselves as we see our lives being driven down by falsity and falsehoods and fiat. De facto, just the fact of something's driving you down. The fact of the inability of the Congress to come together to oust the feds, the Federal Reserve, and just start printing its own making its own monetary system free of usury, free of any problems. They haven't decided to do that. So you know that there's a private control. Well, we still have to have control of our lives locally. This is one of the tools. Anybody with the mineral lands who has a group of people that can speak from a mineral lands, and probably in particular limited to valuable mineral deposits, as it's stated in the 1866 law, will have a power they can assert. And this is very big. I told you the comprehension of it is fairly large. You got water rights, highway rights. You got minerals, wealth, and possession and control. So this is a big power that I don't hear in this article coming out of the counties who hope to draw the Forest Service back. Folks, I'm telling you, they're going to be required to be at that table, or the Forest Service not going to get much done. Shasta Trinity National Forest officials in March adopted a plan to keep all-terrain vehicles, dirt bikes, and other motorized machines on designated roads away from sensitive areas that could suffer damage from tire tread. Well, let me just suggest something to you folks as we come and move into this. As the miners understand their power and assert themselves locally to these districts, you know that the Forest Service has no right to forest designated roads. Those roads were most of the roads were constructed underneath the grant. The Forest Service has no authority because those are reserved upon the reservation. The Forest Service takes subject to that. And it's not going to be about off-road access. See, this is a limitation on the argument. This is going to be about ingress and egress. When the miners step up, they're going to say ingress and egress, not ATV, not off-road vehicle, not dirt bike, because that's irrelevant. What they'll be saying, what the miners are being saying, and we're doing it. In fact, that came out as a not part of the mining district quite yet, but as something that we've been working on. That the miners and those of you that are out here in the public lands, anybody now, folks, and go to miningrights.org and to send an email to the webmaster there so we can get in touch with the gentleman who the mining association vice president who has been tasked to find these. If you know of a closed road, a road that existed in Oregon at least for 10 years or longer, and since 1976 in California, if you know of a road that's been obstructed either by gate, by tank trap, which is a big ditch, boulders, felled trees, any kind of project for firewood, fire suppression where they pile a bunch of garbage on a road, if you know about a road in Oregon, and I'd say just anywhere in Northern California too, that has been obstructed in any way that's existed longer than 10 years, or in California 1976, I want you to contact the webmaster at miningrights.org and tell them exactly where that road is. Exactly. I need to know the map. We need to know exactly where it is, and that information will be forwarded onto the BLM, because the BLM has just found out, if not by spirit, but by the law, that they're going to have to understand that they can't block these roads anymore. So this is the power that you bring, we can bring, and the miners will be bringing, not hope to draw back the Forest Service, but a power to demand that they do the law. We're not speaking from off-roaders, a mode. We're speaking from the ingress and egress right. And this is when you start to understand what I'm telling you, folks. We get away from administrative side, and we get right into property rights. And this is why you hear me be I'm so determined and so, if you will, strong-headed about this. It's not an arrogance at all. It's strictly what the law has said and provided and required, that there's some usurpers that have taken our lands away from us, that had no right. And you're listening to the miners step up. I'm telling you, this was historic, what's going on. It will be a further continuation of a historic act that the miners stay cohesive and redress the grievance of the theft of their properties, and it'll benefit everyone. Thank you.